So I've just come back from riding the Pan-Celtic race where I came joint second. I'll be doing a full video about my experiences and everything like that, so check that out up here with the link. But in this video I want to do an overview of everything that I took with me, including the bike, the setup and all of my equipment and clothing and everything like that, just to give you an idea of the things that I took and any things that I wouldn't take or would take next time. Whilst I've done lots of other bike touring and bike packing trips, this is the first bike packing race that I've done, so it's sort of quite hard to know what to take and what not to take. Obviously when I'm just going out on a casual weekend, there's lots of things that I can just pop in, and it doesn't really matter whether it takes up any space or not. It's interesting packing for the race, and I packed like 3 or 4 times just to make sure that I only took what I thought I'd need. And there's still lots of things that I didn't use, so for next year's event or any other ultra endurance bike packing racing that I'll do, there's definitely some changes that I'll do for next time, which will hopefully save weight and just make it a bit more efficient and yeah, lighter and more aero really. So this is the bike that I took with me, and I only got it beginning of this year, and sort of with the idea of these sort of ultra endurance bike packing races in mind. It's a Trek de Marne SL from I think 2019. It was a custom build, so there's some changes like the wheels and things that were obviously custom for the person that bought it initially. So in terms of the bags that I took, these are my bags that I normally take with me bike packing, so there's no really major difference there. The rear I've got the Apidura 14 litre saddle bag, the front I've got the Apidura 14 litre handlebar bag. I've got a couple of sort of Amazon pieces here. This is a Rock Bros top tube bag. I've got a Ross wheel frame bag, and then I've got an Alp Kit stem bag at the top. So where should we start? I think I'll actually start at sort of the middle of the bike, because this is the area that I knew that I'd want the most important things and everything I wanted to access whilst I was riding, which normally I wouldn't be so bothered about stopping and undoing my saddlebag. Because it's a race, I wanted to make sure that everything I had to have like quick access was right in my top tube bag, in my stem bag, or my frame bag, just because I can access them whilst riding along, and that would minimise stopping times. So firstly, in the top tube bag, this is where I sort of had my essentials. So I've got a battery pack in here. This is a 15,000 milliamp hour battery pack, and along with that I've got a couple of cables. I've got a USB-C cable, and I've got a micro USB cable here as well, so that's both for my Garmin and for my phone and all my lights and everything. I've also got a pair of headphones, and these are wired headphones just so they don't take up any unnecessary battery for my phone, being if they're Bluetooth. And as well as that, I kept my money in here, and just all my sort of on-the-go food. So these were just a couple of bars, fruit bars. I didn't really use too many gels or anything like that, but I kept a few in there just as a backup in emergencies, and any like electrolyte tablets in there as well. And I tried to keep a little bit of sort of savoury food, so I just got some oat cakes that are just, you know, nice to have every so often, just because, yeah, sweet bars and gels are just, yeah, fine for a couple of hours, but then you want some savoury real food really. So yeah, that was quite an important bag, just because it had everything that I wanted to access really quickly. And then in the frame bag, it's quite a small frame bag, just because I've got a small frame, and this is the sort of the biggest one I could fit, along with 2 water bottles. But this had a real range of items in here, and it was always quite stuffed. But yeah, there's a lot in here. So firstly, I've got chain lube, just I wanted to make sure that I did lube up my chain as frequently as possible. I've got some chamois cream, which I decanted into a much smaller pot. You can see there's still a fair amount left in there, but yeah, that was in there so I could access that quite easily. Got a multi-tool, and again this was just really useful just to have, just for any of those little adjustments, any little niggles that I need to do on the bike, often on the go. Like one of my bolts on the TT bars came loose, that was just, I could just do that whilst I was cycling along, so that was really handy to have on hand. What else? I've got my sun cream, again really important, and just having it on hand, maybe put it on more times a day, which is really important for, you know, there's probably 2 or 3 of the days when it was, yeah, you definitely needed a lot of sun cream on. I had some rescue cream, which I think next year I might just take some pseudo cream. This was kind of for like saddle sores in the evening and put on any skin that was damaged during the day. I've got some arm warmers because it was quite warm. I didn't need them during the day really, but often in the evenings it was just nice to put those on. Had my first aid, and in here just some really basic first aid, some plasters, including some blister plasters which I didn't need to use, some toothpaste, a toothbrush, a tick remover which again didn't need, some toilet roll, and some paracetamol which I didn't need, but yeah, good to have on hand. You put some of these down, too much in this bag. Some hand gel, which could keep your hygiene up to scratch. Just a little rag, just for any cleaning of the chain. I didn't actually use that many times. I was a bit lazy, but should have done a bit more. I've got my brevet card, and we needed this at each of the checkpoints and at the finish just to get a stamp. And again, when I was arriving at the checkpoints, I wanted it just to be on hand that I could quickly hand over to the person stamping it. I had some lip balm, and my lips were one of the worst things that, the worst, not an injury, but they didn't handle it that well, especially the sun. And so, yeah, some lip balm, that really helped, just to soothe my lips a little bit. And a couple more things. GoPro. I was planning on filming some of the race, and I filmed like the first 5 minutes of getting off the ferry and all that kind of buzz. But then I was just like, actually, I was so focused on riding and I couldn't only think about riding, sleeping, eating. That was like just the only thing. So getting out the camera and filming and speaking was just, it wasn't even an option really. So that was, it's not that big, but it has a bit of weight to it. So yeah, next year I definitely wouldn't take this. I'd probably just take my phone and just film with that, just because it was just, not that necessary really. And the last thing in here, again, I didn't use it, but I guess it's useful to take, was a lock. It was actually, even though this is fairly small, I think I probably could get a smaller one just because I didn't actually ever use it. I was never that far away from my bike. It was only when I was going into like a supermarket or something, but then I'd often just be a little spa supermarket that I could always see my bike, but then I'd just put the chain into really hard gear and just put my helmet through the wheel, so I was never that far away that I could run after it if need be. So I might not take a lock next time, but as you can see, there's a fair amount of things that I had in my frame bag. And these are all really useful objects that I did actually, apart from the lock and the GoPro, I did use quite a lot, and they were just so handy having them, just so that I could quickly open the bag and just grab them out. And some things that meant I used more often, like the sun cream and the chamois cream, just because they were so easy to access that it was sort of hard not to do. So yeah, I was actually quite pleased about how much I fitted into this bag. And then the stem bag is fairly big, as you can see. It's about 1.4 litres, I think. And in here, again, I had things that I wanted to access during the day. I had a few pieces of clothing. This is my high-vis gilet that it was a little bit too big actually, and sort of quite flappy, so I wasn't wearing that the whole time. I would definitely wear it during the night in sort of dusky conditions, but sometimes during the day I'll just pop it in here. And then I've got a couple of other things, just like some nuts and raisins. I'd normally quite like that, just something a bit more savoury. Has some fruit, an apple, often bananas or something, and then a snud. Again, I'd wear this most of the time, but then if it was really hot, then I'd take it off and pop it in there. Sometimes, because this bag was quite deep and it had so many other things in it, that the food at the bottom would often, I think I carried these oatcakes the whole way and sort of forgot they were down there, just because it was sort of endless bag. And biscuits. It's got through a lot of biscuits. Too many biscuits, I think. And just some, just other nuts and stuff in there. This has got useful for, obviously in here I could fit bars quite easily, but like a big bag of nuts and raisins, just that would keep me going throughout the day, I'd normally put in this bag. Just because it has a bit bigger capacity. Right, so moving on to the saddle bag. This was, an area that was pretty handy to have. It's pretty stable at the back, so it's good for the sort of slightly heavy items and bulky items, but again, things that you didn't really need to access too much during the day, so had a couple of loose items. Here I've got some long finger gloves, which I only use a couple of times during the evenings or the mornings. But yeah, so I don't need to access them that much, but it's good to have. I have some long leg warmers, which are quite warm, which again similar to the gloves that, you know, I think I used a couple of times, but yeah, it wasn't that frequent. And then I had my waterproof jacket. Really, you know, this is essential to have. And sometimes if it was sort of a bit of a drizzly day, I might just have it on the top of my saddlebag, but we had quite decent weather, so I didn't use it that many times. And then I had a couple of dry bags in here. This one was sort of my electronics and important things. So I had my passport, my health card. I had one backup cable, just because I had two cables here. I thought it'd be good to have a secondary cable just for, you know, if anything got damaged or anything, you still need to charge up your devices. What else I've got? I carried a spare GoPro battery, which I didn't use. It didn't even use my GoPro at all, so I didn't need my spare battery, that's for sure. This is just a fairly small plug socket. Had a secondary battery pack. I had one which was 15,000 milliamp hours. This was 10,000, and this was just, yeah, between these two, that was nearly enough. It wasn't quite enough to get me through the whole race, but that was in here in a nice dry bag. Yeah, that's that bag. What else I've got in here? I've got my spare clothes in here, and I quite like in here just because it is, you know, you can end up having quite a few items of items in the saddlebag, and some people have it all loose, but I just prefer having them in little dry bags. Not so much, you know, obviously it's good to have double dry bags to make sure they stay dry. This is fairly waterproof, but it's good to have a secondary dry bag as well. But mostly just so it's easier to organise. So if you suddenly need something, you can quickly identify the bag. I knew where each item was in each bag, so it meant I could just grab one bag out without having to like pull out everything else. So yeah, this is my spare clothes, and nothing's been washed, so it does smell a bit. So I'm glad you can't smell that. And this was in addition to the clothes I was wearing. So I had obviously one pair of socks, a pair of bibs, and a short sleeve jersey that I was riding in, and then I had a long sleeve jersey, just one of these, which I used, you know, a fair few times. Luckily it's quite warm, so I didn't use it too many times. Had a spare pair of bibs, which, because it was quite warm, you know, I did sweat a lot, so I was very glad of these, and it just helps with the saddle soreness and just like mixing up the bibs you're wearing. I've got a spare short sleeve jersey, which, yeah, next time I might not bother with. I've forgotten if I don't think I actually swapped my jersey. It gets to a point where you're going to smell, so, and this smells anyway without me even wearing it, just because with other clothes. So yeah, I think I would just skip that spare jersey next time. And then finally a spare pair of socks. So yeah, I think I could definitely cut down on that next time, but they're not too heavy, so yeah, I wasn't concerned about the too much. And then finally, the last item in here was my toolkit. A nice and bright orange, so I could quickly identify which bag that I was in. And obviously I've got my mod tool in my frame bag, which I'd sort of use, you know, during the day a little bit if needed. But this was my full toolkit. Even though I'm running tubeless, it was the first time I was running tubeless, I wasn't too sure how they'd cope, so I had two inner tubes, which is probably a good idea anyway, just because, you know, you never know what's going to happen. I had some things to mend the tubeless tyres, which I'd never used before, so I took them, but I wasn't completely convinced I'd be able to mend it if anything did happen, like a big hole or something. I probably have to do a bit of YouTubing at the time. Had a quick link, just in case anything happened with the chain. I had a couple of zip ties. Yeah, zip ties are quite useful. You can mend a surprising number of things with zip ties. With my gilet, I mentioned that was quite flappy and a little bit too big for me. I put a zip tie through the arm and just around the top, just to pull it together a little bit, which did help a little bit. And obviously we had a spot tracker, and so then you need some spare zip ties for that, just in case anything breaks there. And then I had some tie levers, just 2, and a little pump, and I had some electrical tape on the pump. Again, you never know what you can mend with that. I had some patches for inner tubes, a gear cable, and finally just some tiny little rubber gloves, either just in case it got really wet and I needed some gloves to keep me dry, but mainly just if I had any mechanical or issues with my sealant or anything, then I'd be able to keep my hands clean whilst doing that. And then with the handlebar bag, this was where I kept my sleep system, and if I open it up, let's have a look inside. So got my sleeping bag. This is a Mountain Equipment Helium Solo, which is like a summer sleeping bag. You can probably go smaller and lighter, but I didn't want to spend any more money. I had a small Thermarest sleeping mat, and this adds a bit of warmth, adds a bit of protection from the ground, and adds a nice bit of comfort. I was debating whether to take this along for this race, and in the end I did, just because I'd never sort of slept outside without a sleeping mat. But there's most of the times I was just sleeping in like a field or a field entrance where I had got a nice comfy grass. So I think next time I might try I think next time I might try beforehand, just try sleeping without having a mat, and seeing how it is, because I'd be tempted not to bother with that. It's not too big, but it does add a little bit of weight and a bit of size. And then I've got my bivvy bag. It's one of the lightest bivvy bags I could find. It's about 265 grams from Alpkit. It's the Alpkit cloak one. It's pretty spacious, and good colour, just to be blends in with the grass, and not much else to add to that really. It was just pretty small, pretty light, and kept the dew and the rain out. So that was what was in my handlebar bag. So I've just been editing the video and I realised that the last section, for some reason the camera stopped recording, so I'll have to do it again. And there's only a few final things to mention. Firstly, the TT bars. These are some profile design TT bars, clip-on ones, and they're really useful for these sort of ultra endurance kind of events. Firstly, for aerodynamics, you can rest your arms in there in a much more aero position, but also it's really important because you have a sort of secondary position that you can use, and I find that it's a lot less pressure on your hands, and also for saddle sores as well. I found when I was on TT bars that was really good, just to be able to change the position a little bit, so you definitely recommend those. And I've got a 40mm riser as well, just so it's a bit more relaxed. And then on here I've got my Garmin. This is the Garmin Edge 820, I think, which is a bit old. I'd probably try and upgrade for the next event I do. Overall, I didn't really have any issues with it. There were a couple of kept on running battery quite quickly. It would never last sort of more than half a day with like navigation and everything going on. So that's probably something I'd want to upgrade next time. But in terms of navigation, it never really got lost apart from a couple of times. So that was pretty good. And then also up here, I've got the lights, and this is a Lezyne 1300 lumen light, I think, which was plenty enough to see at night, and really good visibility and fairly decent battery as well. And obviously because I was sleeping a little bit during the night, so the nights weren't particularly long, and it was summer as well, so that also helped. But yes, I had that up here, and then I also had a sort of a secondary Lezyne that is a 600 lumen light, which I just had clipped on the TT bars, and that was really just as a sort of backup one, just in case anything happened to my main light. And then at the back I had two of these Ria Design Strip Pro 300 lumen lights, and we always had to have a rear flashing light on all the time, so I had two of those, and I think on the lowest setting it would last for something like 50 hours, so that was, so I didn't really recharge them that many times, and because I had two, it meant that I always had a backup just in case it did run out of battery. And then finally, water bottles. I had two 1 litre water bottles, which I think was kind of enough. Potentially could have had more water, but I didn't find that it wasn't super hot, and there were plenty of places to fill up with water. So I think, I think it would be useful to have additional capacity for water, but I didn't really find that it was a massive issue. So yeah, I hope you found it useful. Whether you're planning on going on an ultra endurance race or just a long bikepacking trip, and yeah, let me know if you have any comments or thoughts of how I could improve my setup. There were a couple of things that I mentioned that I probably wouldn't take next year, or maybe would consider try experimenting before, like not taking my GoPro, not taking a lock, potentially not taking a thermarest mat. But I guess some of these things depends on the weather and the climate and how long you're going for. But yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. Happy adventuring.